Okay, welcome to this seminar conducted by Antonino Crivello about monitoring neurohuman activities for ambient assisted living. Antonino Crivello is visiting us for 5 weeks here in Castellón. He came from the CNR in Pisa in Italy, but he was born in Trapani in Sicily. He did the PhD in the University of Siena and the CNR, and he's working currently at the CNR as postdoc, probably. Yeah, or sometimes our postdoc figures are quite difficult to explain.
It's the same about postdoc.
So welcome to Castellón, and please, I give you the word.
Good morning to everybody. This talk will talk about monitoring neurohuman activities, but there is an important word that is ambient assisted living, and I will explain why I put the focus on that particular scenario. But sorry for this. I want to spend just 2 words on who I am. I'm an automation and robotic engineer, and after the master, I moved into the industry in a spin-off that produced some biomedical devices for monitoring people at home or in our hospital settings through wearable devices. But during that experience, I fell in love with e-health and people and smart home in some sense. So I decided to move again at the university and start my PhD. And together with contract with the CNR, that is a national council for all of Italy. And I want to spend just 2 words on the CNR. We are the biggest national research of Italy. We count more or less 9,000 people involved around Italy. And the CNR works on everything, from the health sciences to robotics, engineering, computer science, laws, etc., economy. And the area in Pisa is the biggest because are involved more or less 1,200 people, workers, and there are 13 institutes. And the Institute of Science, Technology and Information is the largest ICT institute. So we are more or less 100 researchers. And we take a lot of external projects. Currently, we have more or less 35 European projects. That is a good result. And my institute, that is called ISTI, is split in several laboratories. And I belong to the wireless network laboratory. And these 3 keywords are our research lines. We are more or less 15 people, 12 researchers and 3 technicians and administrators. A small group works on Internet of Things. In this perspective, they work with optimization. If you see the OSI stack, they work on a very low level, communication, etc., and 5G and network architecture. And the rest of us works on both of them. So cyber physical system and human in the loop. And these 2 research lines have a lot of subtopics, and we will see something later. All the 3 keywords have a lot of reference scenarios. In fact, in the last decade, more probably in the last 20 years, we heard a lot about smart cities, smart industry, smart home, smart health, etc., etc. And the word smart is very common nowadays, too much probably. And this scenario involves, in general, people into in smart environment. So what means cyber physical system? A cyber physical system is able, in general, to infer about the state of the user. So what the people feel, which is the physical state, and using this information like input is able to determine some actions for enabling something, services or support, etc. In this context, so thinking about cyber physical system and human in the loop, a typical scenario is called ambient assisted living. So ambient assisted living is in general the combination between the smart home and the smart health, consider it together. This is important because this scenario is motivated for us everything by social political issues. Because as you can see, the foresight of the population, the people above 65 years old are growing from 15% if we see the male to more than 25%. And for sure, there's a huge impact on the expenditure, the public expenditure for care, for long-term care, etc. So there is an economic issue. It's important. And if you see the last 10 years of European calls, they start from the framework, the FP7 program, and they start to give a lot of grants on this scenario. And, a lot of our research is grants-driven sometimes. We use this ambient assisted living as a reference scenario, and it's a very huge scenario that involves a lot of different tasks. So we can try to perform some behavior recognition, for example, or for health monitoring, for sure, or also for activity recognition. But all the three, you can think about to detect some, for example, social events. If you wanna detect some isolation behavior or something like that for prevents separation or something like that, or you can are interested in infer about eye-level activities. For example, if I go to the bathroom for taking I don't know, for do a wash, etc., for taking care of myself. So we can perform some recognition activities for detecting that someone eats sufficiently, if you are sleeping correctly, etc. But there are a lot of challenges because we have to deal with a very heterogeneous world in terms of devices, in terms of environments, physical environments. We have different protocols, different raw data, etc. So it's a very huge scenario and a lot of challenges. And in order to manage this heterogeneity, we need for sure an enabling infrastructure for this, and we have not yet. But also we have to think about how take the actions. So we need a reasoner for taking into account all these inputs and trying to manage and to provide the right actions to the end user. What are our contribution? We detect two different tasks that involves behavior and activity recognition on one hand, and on the other hand, more or less health monitoring. So in this very complex scenario, we define two tasks. My two research lines are related to indoor positioning and sleep monitoring. But always we have to remember which is the scenario, the reference scenario. I will explain later because why. Okay, so starting with my first research line. We are performing some activities on the sleep monitoring. The sleep monitoring is important because the people sleeps. And there are a lot of the problems, especially for older. And there are a lot of key factors that influences the sleep. Like, for example, depression, Alzheimer, or daily activities, etc. And in this sense, understanding a deep understanding of the sleep architecture, but the sleep habit, it's very important also for early detect signs of this K factor. But the sleep monitoring is complex task because there are more or less two approaches. one of an objective approach and a subjective approach. This approach is more related to psychologists. They give to the user questionnaires or sleep diaries in order to detect what they judge their own sleep, if they change the habits during the day, or if they have some assumption of drugs, etc. On the other hand, there is an objective approach. But this objective approach can be done by a clinical setting, and it involves, for sure, doctors, etc., or from devices, commercial devices, own devices, wearable devices, etc. And what means detect the sleep? We can try to detect the architecture of the sleep. I will explain what it means. But also we can, we are interested in detect some indicators of the sleep, some variables that can explain what are happening. But the problem in this context is there is no consensus about what is a good sleep. Because, for example, if you suffer from insomnia, in general you sleep 5 hours per night or 4 hours. If at a certain point you start to sleep 6 hours, for you that's very huge differences in a better sense, right? But if I'm sleep 8 hours because I work a lot, or and at a certain point I start to sleep 6 hours, the same 6 hours. It's not good for me, probably. So there are a lot of variables correlated with that correlates people, their habits, and their variables. Okay, this is a figure of the clinical approach. In general, the doctors perform so-called polysomnography. So they put a lot of sensor in a clinical setting, but also in home settings, and they collect a lot of signals from the brain, from the heart, from position, from the symmetry for the blood, etc. It's complicated to take that technologies in a home setting in a long-term perspective. What we have done? We try to start with detect sleep positions in order to prevent, for example, an ulcer or something that people can suffer when they sleep too much for, I don't know, for problems, for physical problems, etc. So we deploy a virtual grid of 4 sensor resistors in our Raspberry, and we place these 16 or 48 sensors, this amount of sensors on the slats. So between the slats and the mattress, we place these sensors in that way in order to have an non-obtrusive approach. Because in our reference scenario, the Ambient Assisted Living, the people are old in general. And sometimes if you ask to the user to fill some questionnaires or diaries, if they live alone, probably they can do some mistakes because they don't remember, because they have some mental problem. So the non-obtrusive approach are fundamental in this context, in this scenario, in this Ambient Assisted Living scenario, because you don't ask the user to do anything, not to recharge the battery, not to wear anything. Okay. We try to validate also this system with, I will explain now, with better results. But also this approach has some weaknesses. The construction of the ground truth is a huge problem, because we record video for all the nights and we manually score the position in which the user was. So it was 8 hours, 9 hours of video for each night. It was very complicated. But also we have low resolution, and the 4 sensor resistors are cheap sensors, but the calibration of this, we are not able to use very precise sensors. So the calibration phase is something tricky, and it's not so easy to construct a model for understand the behavior of a variable put pressure on the sensors, you retrieve the value, but you don't know if this value has some bias. However, when I was at the ITA in Zurich for visiting, we tried to put this sensor in their own smart bed. They built a smart bed that tried to force the posture of the users depending on the microphone, because the bed was thought for snoring people. So they tried to force the people to move in a supine position, for example. And we combined also our system. This is a mesh grid of the pressure. We have all these red points are the pressure that we have because we have a sensor in that point, and we construct an interpolation grid. And we try to detect position using the shape of on this mesh grid. This is a video of my colleagues. So we moved this problem in classification problem, and it works. But it was very difficult to generalize this model. This model works with that user, constructing the ground truth on that user. But if we use that model to other user, female or different ages, etc., it doesn't work anymore. So we move to another technology, and currently we are using a so-called ballistocardiograph technology. These sensors are built with very precise accelerometers, and they are put again in an obtrusive way under the slats or behind or below the mattress, between the slats and the mattress. But these accelerometers are able to infer about breathing patterns, and also to infer about cardiography. So are very good. And using both of them, so breathing actions, breathing patterns, and heart patterns, we are able to identify the sleep architecture. Remember when I told some slides before the sleep architecture? This is an hypnogram. The hypnogram show the sequences of your sleep phases. So you start from awake. After you go to REM phases, for example, arrive at high movements. After you go to the slow wave sleep, your sleep like several stages. But using these two kind of raw data, we are able to infer about this kind of architecture. It's not the only one technology that it's able to infer about it. For example, a lot of actigraphy that are wearable sensors are able to infer about it. But remember our reference scenario. We are looking for an non-obtrusive approach because wearable devices sometimes can be problematic for our user. So we are trying to fill the gap between an objective analysis in a clinical settings and a commercial device. We are trying to define in an objective point of view with what means sleep quality using this raw data. And we are testing our algorithms in a European project that started 2 years ago. And this Nestor is an European project in which we are involved. We have a virtual coach. Basically, this Nestor is a virtual coach. It's the name of a virtual coach that takes inputs from several domains. So we try to set an holistic solution that take information about food, because we ask the user to take a photo of the dish, their plates, and the system detects what are you eating. We applied also the sleep monitoring solutions. We have some wearable devices to infer about social detection using Bluetooth Low Energy or etc. And all these raw inputs goes to decision-making systems like a reasoner, and the reasoner is able to give some suggestion for improve the health of the people, to suggest some pathway for their daily life activities, and suggesting healthy nutrition, etc. A personalized physical and mental coach. This is a good project, I think, because we set co-design tools and methods. We're engaging pilot from 3 countries and also people, so apparently it works. And this was about the sleep monitoring, so the night phases. But during the day, we define our research line on the monitoring indoor human activities, trying to infer the position of the people into an environment. Because if you know where the people are, you can infer more high-level information about what they are doing. Or if they are in the bedroom, they are sleeping, for example. If they stay in the bedroom for 12 hours, probably they got sick or something like that. The problem, as you all well know, is that the GPS is not available into the indoor environments, and we always have to look at the best solution between the best performances, the best trade-off between the performances and cost, and also again looking, remembering our scenario, we have to deal with unobtrusive or quite unobtrusive solutions. So I want to share, and we have also another problem, but I will explain better later. We have also a problem of evaluation, but I will explain later. And also in this field, there are a lot of systems, a lot of technologies, a lot of methods that have been presented, and a lot of them work using the radio characteristics. So Wi-Fi signals, Bluetooth signals, etc. And as you can see, there are some systems use also magnetic field or ultrawideband, etc. For example, in single device or multiple device localization. And if we're looking for an unobtrusive or a quite unobtrusive solution, we can think to use the smartphone, because it's something that anyone has always in their own pocket, right? So I want to share with you just one of the approaches that we tested for a single or multiple device localization. And 1 year ago, we tried to use radio messages, and it's called probes. The probes are messages that every device is sent in order to understand which kind of SSID are available into the environment. So periodically, your devices, as the network interfaces switched on, sends this kind of messages over internet, and retrieve the responses from the access point. So we collect these probe messages using sniffing devices, and we store the timestamp of the packet received from the sniffer, the MAC address of the sending device, the ID of the receiver, and the receiver signal strength of this signal. We deploy in 3 different working places. The sniffers are the blue points, and the red cross are the target. So the devices that we are trying to identify. They are not moving. They are computer or devices left on the table, etc. And just to say We perform 2 months, 2 months and a half of this collecting data, deploying different focus sense, different sniffers, because it depends from the size and also from the characteristics of the building. And the good idea in this paper, in my opinion, was that we construct an inverse fingerprint. Okay, a fingerprint map. Okay. When you are interested in detect someone in using the radio characteristics, in general, you perform, you collect a fingerprint map. You build a fingerprint map. Fingerprint map means you go into the environment and you take a survey of all the environment, moving 1 meter by 1 meter, staying with your device in your hand, collect data from the environment, for example, the access point, or the magnetometer, etc. You collect all these data and you store in a database. When a new device comes into the environment, we send you the raw data and you try with metrics to find the neighbors between this raw data and the data that you collected before. For sure, this approach is very common, but sometimes has some problems because the devices has, for example, different transmitters, and also the environment can change because some access points are replaced or some furniture are moved, so the fingerprint maps change. And in this works, we perform an automatic fingerprint construction using only only the probes messages that the anchors send each other. After that, so we have data from 4 or 6 or a few number of anchors, and we construct with an interpolation. We construct a radio fingerprint, and after that we use the same idea of applying what the devices are retrieving and trying to evaluate some distances between the raw data and the fingerprint maps and giving the estimation as output. Another interesting, but this idea comes from Kimo. Sometimes you don't know which is the best distances because there are a lot. You don't know which are the parameters of, for example, K and N, or which is the best size for your grid, etc. So we perform all of them. We use a Kimo idea to create an ensemble. So we perform just moving once these parameters in trying to apply a linear interpolator with one KNN using Manhattan, etc., etc. All these approaches that we set construct like 150 different algorithms with different settings, and we apply all these methods to each scenario. We sort the performances, and for sure, for each scenario, the performance was different. Depends from which kind of parameters you set. So we select the top 4 meters for each reference scenario, and we find if there was some intersection between the best methods for each scenario in order to find the best solution for all the scenarios. This is a tricky idea, but it can be useful in different scenarios, in different contexts. So these are just some results that we perform without a survey, a manual survey that costs a lot. We perform good results for an indoor environment because we detect the devices with 3 meters, 4 meters of error. And in an indoor environment, it's quite good for our experience. But Houston, we have a problem. Because, okay, I say that we perform 4 meters of error. But, however, we have an evaluation problem. Because in our experience, We read a lot of paper, 1,000 paper for describing the indoor positioning system, and it works. The day works perfectly, but they perform tests on their own environment using their own metrics. The accuracy is not the only one metrics that care in our context, because it's important the precision, for example, also the accuracy, and it's important to detect the right position in the third quartile or in the 90 percentile. I don't know which is the best. There is no consensus about how to evaluate the different metrics. CIMO starts more or less 6 years ago to offer to the community, to our indoor positioning community, a lot of data sets, because it was the first step. We have to test our algorithms on the same data, because otherwise it's impossible to compare also the performances. But after we moved together, looking for an evaluation framework for everyone. So we start to define tools and metrics able for comparing real-time systems and offline systems. And we test our evaluation framework into competition that is held together with the indoor positioning, indoor navigation conference. And in that competition, in 6 years, we perform a competition. I'm the track chair of the smartphone-based solution. So my track, the competitors are allowed just to use the smartphone. All the sensors into the smartphone with any algorithms, but with using what they want, but only the sensors built in the smartphone. And Chemo care about the same track, but in an offline settings. So it records a lot of different traces into the environment, and the competitors decide which path generates that measurement. So our evaluation framework is very simple, probably, but it works in our idea, in our community. So we said, well, as core metrics, we suggest you to use the device in a natural way. So you have to walk naturally in a realistic environment. The competition is held in a university, conference mall, shopping mall. And we use the third quartile because we are testing prototype. So it's no ninth quartile, but for prototyping, it's good enough. And we also add some criteria, because we set a path, but we keep secret just for hours before the competition starts, and the device is used from an external actor. So you cannot perform any tuning knowing your stride length or etc., because your system will be used from an external actor. And we also gave some login system in order to avoid some recursory customization or slam techniques, etc. And we use the identical path for the competitors. And for just a test case, we applied this framework into the competition of the 2016 in Alcalá de Henares. And in that case, we set 4 tracks: the smartphone-based PDR positioning, so inertial measurement units, a smartphone-based offline, and there was also a robot tracking there with the ultra-wideband solutions. We also had a penalty of 15 meters if the devices promotes the floor detection, and we measure the error on Euclidean with an Euclidean distance between the ground truth and the estimation of the given by the devices. In my track, so again, the actor moves naturally. The spatial resolution, the minimal spatial resolution is set to 0.5 meters. And this was the maps of the Alcala campus. So we put 56 key points on the ground floor using some markers. And the path will start from the ground level. And we also use elevators and stairs, so it was very challenging. And that are the results of my competitor. And again, in this case, it's quite easy to understand which system performs better. But in some cases, like for example, the pink one, the blue one, it's not so easy to understand which system performs better than the other one. We highlighted the third quartile because it was an hypothesis of our framework. And we are satisfied of the framework is used, and now it's the standard for the IP conference, and is adopted like a reference framework. And also I want to remark that in the 2016, arise the first ISO standard for evaluating systems. So the needs of standardization grows in our community. Mm-hmm. And there is only one standard presented 2-3 years ago. But why I'm here? Because we are, with Kimo, we are trying to take some step into the future. So we image, it's a very important assessment, but we set some hypotheses. So we are trying to imagine what will are the indoor location system in the next 10 years. So we imagine a future in which the indoor location or indoor positioning systems are mature enough to be sold as off-the-shelf solutions. You can buy, you can apply into your own environment, and you can use it. And also, for example, the shopkeepers understand the powerful of adopting this solution, because they can offer to the users information about where they book cars, or they can release some services new services to the users. And also the clients, the end users, are attracted to use these new services and these new features from these devices, from these systems. Sorry. So probably we will see a transcend where solution providers set on the market a lot of technologies and different approaches, and some competitors dominate the market probably in the future, Google, Apple, or something like that, or some solution will perform better than the other one. And also from the client point of view, the problem is probably we should install 100 applications for using 100 different indoor location systems or location-based services. And this is a problem. So let's start by analyzing very common scenario, an airport. In this airport, for sure, is a very big and complex area. There are many terminals, many gates, shops, etc. And for sure, for example, the JFK airport, the maps of the JFK airport is already available on Google Maps. But in this context, a lot of stakeholders can be interested in give more services about the location, so some location-based services. So for example, imagine a guy that get the entry of the airport and find an ELS system that is managed from the airport authority. After I want to go to the bookstore to book some book. And there is also a supermarket. You try to book something, milk or water before to take the airplane. but probably have to install 3 different applications. But in this context, we are starting to imagine also what happens if some anchors, for example, some access points, or some systems are able to exchange information between each other. So probably this access point can give information, useful information to the ELS2 and to the ELS3 in terms of received signal strength, for example. So probably we have to move our problem from indoor location systems domain to location-based services domain. And in order to avoid this proliferation of smartphone application or custom application, we have to create an abstraction layer for the ELS. After this different system should be able to discover each other using a discovery protocol. This discovery protocol is a part of a more general lifecycle process. But in order to correctly define this discovery protocol, or more accurately, this lifecycle process, we have to define a rigorous taxonomy of the ELS. So, which are the features, the characteristics that define correctly and in an exhaustive way an ELS. At the end, we have also to create an abstraction architecture for enabling this kind of feature. So we need a discovery middleware or a discovery agent that is that is able to take the information from the ELS and to give useful information through API, etc., to the end device. But there are a lot of discovery protocols, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, probably. We have just to understand which binding protocol adopt in our context and which kind of discovery protocol we can use. Zero config, PNP, etc. This draft. The slide show a draft of a live process. This discovery, for sure, is the most important part, probably. But we imagine also an initiation phase in which you give some authentication information for security reason, for accounting, etc. And after you find using this discovery process the services, the LBS that are available into the environment, and you can access them. After you can use for sure the localization and the tracking feature, and there is a last living phase for this process. And this is a draft of the taxonomy. So, for example, we have to think about the user concern. So the privacy issues like consent, accountability, the purpose, etc. And also from the security point of view, if there is some authority, there is some techniques for preventing jamming, etc. But from the system point of view, we have also to understand which are the topology of this kind of system, and present just, because I have experience on that, just infrastructure-based and infrastructure-free, but there are not only two, there are a lot of system topology, and also the kind of processing. Because you can use a radio-based, I show the fingerprint, ready map, etc., but there are a lot of processing, apply deep learning or convolutional neural network, or I don't know, dynamic time warping, or etc., etc., etc. So we need more level for define this kind of taxonomy. And remember that the ELS is a part of this world. The user and the end user is another part. There is a common protocol for enabling the communication between all these agents, and there is also other services, like for example the map server, who gives the maps, or who perform the navigation feature for the end user using an ELS. And for sure they can be distributed or someone can be on the cloud and some agent can be locally, or we can think about different topologies. Or for firefighter, for example, they can have all of this. I take this example because the ISO standard presented 3 years ago talks about firefighter. In that case, there are some problems and they adopt some device bases. So all of these agents can be built into a single devices, but we can imagine also some cloud-based topology, or a solution in which something is on the devices, something is local in a physical sense. If we start to imagine what the discovery should provide in terms of details, we can try to draw this kind of tree. For example, for an ELS, we need to have some information about the different level of the topology. And for example, this lift can give us information about the processing of the raw data. And we can, using this information, we can understand if some raw data can be useful also for our system, or if we can give some information to that the ELS for improve the performances. For sure, we need also a machine-to-machine entry point in order to enabling this cooperation. And we also we start to think about the new patterns, new services of the future. After all this information are aggregated together, and we have to understand which is the topology of this ELS. For sure, the sense of this discovery protocol is that the ELS want to cooperate each other in order to give new services, new patterns, and to improve their own performances. And for example, we can start to imagine new patterns and new services for the future. We try to define new patterns. For example, a converging pattern. For policemen are interesting in surround the target. So they have to know where the other people are in a real time, and the navigation engine have to give information to all of them in order to give the right position of a target, and the policeman should be able to surround the target in an efficient way. But also we are looking for a navigation plus navigation pattern, because two people are trying to reach each other. So the system should be able to give information about the position of them and find the shortest path for enabling the meeting. But also we are starting to imagine, for example, that you can talk with your supermarket through a chatbot. So you can send to the Carrefour, a list of your the list of the item that you need, and the supermarket answers you with a map in which are plotted where your items are. So as you can imagine, this is a very long goal. But we think that our vision can inspire our community, but also the hardware community to work together to this feature, to realize this feature. And in my personal long-term goals are trying to create a Ambient Assisted Living suite, services suite for people. Nestor project is probably a starting point, but we need to apply more techniques and more systems for enabling more domain. And so the best things probably is it will be create a services suite that is able to take into account the night activities and the day activities at the time. That's all.
most important part. If there is any question in the room for Antonino's, please, we have to.
And for one attends from abroad, you just write me at this email. I'm very happy to answer you if I can.
The 9 people that are on the other side, they can also try to send some message through the chat, especially the ESRs that are in Italy, in Czech Republic, in Romania, or in Finland, because it can be also a good way to know who is attending the seminar.
Mm-hmm. Nobody problem.
No, there are 9 people connected.
Connected, but problem.
Okay, so, Mike.
Can you tell us more about the ISO standard? What exactly is that standardizing? What's the focus?
The focus was trying to give guidelines for evaluate the LBS, so the location-based services. But they start to draw some guidelines in terms of metrics, a scenario. So they start to draw which kind of environment can be categorized. For example, all the ancient buildings with some problems, because I don't know why, we try to ask to the authors, because we know them, but they have always in their mind the fight keeper. So a lot of the contents on the ISO standards is taught for that very particular scenario. But however, they start to draw something that I presented. So which kind of metrics are reasonable in our scenario? So if you are thinking to set an indoor positioning system, which kind of evaluation you have to provide to the other? And they talks about environments, metrics, and performances.
Okay. We'll have to we'll investigate it and see the details. I was wondering also about your targets, because you've got the sensor and you've got the targets. Have you considered targets talking to each other, so peer-to-peer, providing information about position or whatever else?
Yeah, but we are doing some experiment for social interaction, for detecting if two devices are close each other, but we are not so good in peer-to-peer network. So we have to investigate it, because probably it's the right way also for enabling some new patterns or new services. The problem is a lot of my activities relies on a smartphone. And sometimes we have a lot of problem to share information using, for example, Apple devices or Android. So it's not so easy to retrieve information and send in an efficient way this information to each other in a real time. But probably.
You mean technological reasons or standardization reasons?
Standardization reasons.
But don't you think that's going to improve? It seems, I'm surprised that we're not doing more peer-to-peer communications amongst our phones. I'm surprised it's not happening.
We're not good enough. But for sure, it can be very useful. But our reference scenario talks about people who live alone. So in general, we are interested, but on a single device localization, but for sure that's the right way if multiple devices are together in a shopping or something like that.
Any other question? Pavel, Darwin, Sylvia, no question? Well, I really like your presentation, your talk, because it introduced us a use case, which is under assisted living for indoor location, but also they focused on evaluation, which is quite important nowadays. He saves us a huge problem in research, that usually we are as researchers, we have limited budget, limited infrastructures, and we try to evaluate our systems in our facilities. And that's a huge problem because then you have one system provided by team A, one system provided by team B, and regarding the results they are providing, A is better than B. But when you test them in a realistic conditions, similar conditions, and with multiple scenarios, then you can realize that B can be much better than A, because of the scenario. So it's also a comment to all the ESRs from AWare that please pay attention on the evaluation, also on the procedures to collect data, because they are quite important. You have to define them in advance, not just collect data by collect data. And also, probably we have to push to the standards, to the standardization bodies to improve and to grade the standard because, well, they were issued 3 years ago, but now we have more information and more data. So we as community, we should work on that. And finally, thanks for your long-term view, because I think this is the correct path we have to follow, not just to do the work by ourselves, trying to solve a problem that with a system that can end in a cabinet in the next year. So probably the good approach is establish good collaboration between the community, not only between AWare and CNR, I mean between the indoor community and the Ambient assisted living community. And
yeah, also because there is a huge goal. It's impossible to reach with my 4 colleagues. So we have to involve people that knows about maps, about geo information. We cannot know anything, everything. So this is, I think, it's the future of our community. But in order to realize these goals, we have to involve a lot of. We have to reach consensus about some strategic choice, and also to involve people that know more than us. We know a little part of this global work, but we need to encourage collaboration between different groups.
And just a final question: did you think about the workload that we will have in the next years? Because probably a little too much.
Probably I will retire.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for your.
Yeah, I have one more question. I see you are optimistic about the maturity of the technology, current maturity, but I don't see a lot of use cases where this technology, I don't see so many use cases where the indoor location is already like widely adopted. For instance, if you visit Mobile World Congress, or if you visit one of these events where it's supposed to be all the technological advances at the moment, there is no there is no solution that is widely adopted.
No, I think the same.
I think it is because of in cases like the Mobile World Congress, there are 30,000 people around, and all the people with the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi and all. There are so many collisions, so many
Interesting.
Yeah, so that it is impossible to make all these devices work properly. So, do you think that do you agree with me that it's not
I agree that at the moment there is no consensus on which technologies performs better, because it's strongly related to the environment. In my experience, the widely adopted technologies is the ultra wideband. But when I talk about technology mature enough in the next 10 years, I suppose that there is not one technology that it's the perfect solution, or the GPS for the indoor, the same level of technology. But probably we will have a lot of well-defined technology, use it in the right way in a particular environment. So for wide area with small environments, we can use Wi-Fi based technology, for example, for very particular precision, robotic, etc. application, we can use ultra-wideband. But probably we will have a company that can provide us we can provide us the technologies that works for our environment.
So
At the moment, I think it's just a money problem, because if you have availability of money, you can find a company that come here, put 300,000 anchors, and the technology works. From the technology point of view, it works, right?
so you think ultra-wideband,
Yeah, in my opinion, it's the way to adopt the technology.
and because it is all being now deployed and integrated in regular smartphones, maybe it's going to make a difference.
Probably, but I don't know.
Okay, so we need to buy some
Yeah, in my experience is the way,
beacons and an iPhone 11.
because they reach the
iPhone one.
most precise performances. They reach very, very good accuracy. But there is a money problem at the moment, because you have to set very particular devices with a very specific tuning, etc. So it's just a money problem. And probably it depends also from the environment, for sure. When you go to a conference, in our conference, every paper works, but for sure. But we observe when we test this system in a realistic environment, the performance drops dramatically. Because for sure, there's also an unconscious way to proceed. You bias your system, also if you don't want, sometimes. So, my experience by attending conference, etc., on this topic, I heard a lot of paper on ultra-wideband, and I'm convinced that it works. That solution works. I'm not fully agree that that solution can be a standard de facto as the GPS for the outdoor environment, for the indoor environment. But for sure, we have to consider the technologies, because at the moment it's the most used technology.
So why do you think ultra wideband was added to the telephone, to the iPhone 11? What was the use case, or what was the demand? Was it for positioning?
Yeah.
Or was it for some other purposes?
I think for position, but I don't know. I really don't know.
I think that's sending us a very strong signal. If they invested all this money in doing it, it's for some reason. It's because they see a future.
Yeah.
So do you know if it is announced? Because I was trying to find, but if it is announced on Android phones yet. I didn't see any announcement.
There was an old Android phone that has.
Yeah, but the Tango
No,
device,
Tango.
all these, they had like all kind of sensors and laser and things, but then they did not like continue.
I really don't know. On the other end, for example, the IEEE standard, the 802.11, etc., released 1 year ago a new standard in which they implemented the round trip time, fine time measurement packages. And apparently we published our paper 3 months before using that kind of messages for the positioning purpose. So it was released from the IEEE standard and are currently adopted go from Android 9, from Android 9.2 or something like that. So it's very newborn. So I don't know if all the world thinks about applying ultra-wideband into the smartphone, because, for example, the IEEE community, the communication community, are trying to use a different messages. The RTT FTM apparently works very good. It's a very newborn your newborn message. But so probably it's not the only one technology. We will not have never only one technology is like the GPS. In my opinion, but I'm just one.
Okay. Well, any other question in the room? No more questions. So thank you so much, Antonino. Please, bye-bye to the people on the other side of the camera.